Okay, so this is a follow-up review on the Boker Plus Kerambit pocket knives, and I consider this to be a EDC everyday carry item and a work knife. I know a lot of the other guys that are doing the videos on various pocket knives and that it's become fashionable to go with automatic or assisted opening knives. One of the problems with that is that you're stepping into a legal minefield, especially with the switchblades, which are readily available to purchase throughout most of the United States right now. But if you actually read the laws that are on the books with those things, you can really run into problems in a hurry if you're in a situation where you've got one in your pocket, you weren't remembering that it was in your pocket, you're going into let's say a building with restrictions or something like that, you run into a security guard who doesn't like you, or is just looking to make a score for the day, you can actually be looking at felony problems with a lot of the switchblades if it's, let's say, in your pocket but not clipped. And the other thing about carrying any sort of a weapon, defensive or offensive, in a discreet manner is to keep it discreet. So I'm not a really big fan of the pocket clipped knife in plain view, even though it's very fashionable these days, and sometimes I do it. Sometimes I do it for convenience. That's why I have one of these knives set up with a pocket clip and one without. And but I generally consider these work knives. I know there's been a few other videos and reviews out there where somebody considers it a fighting knife. I gotta say no, because the blade's too small. And we'll explain that in some other knife fighting videos that I'm working on. But as a work knife, these things are excellent. And the reason is because they have a really good working blade. And it's I wouldn't call this a true fighting karambit design because of the design on the blade. The blade is basically where somebody's taking the handle is relatively standard to a karambit. It's got the single ring, which can be a thumb ring or I'm sorry, not a thumb ring, index finger ring for reverse grip, like this, or and not a thumb ring. Or you can put your pinky in there just to keep the thing from slipping when it's wet or something like that. And you generally have, a good firm grip on a knife where it's not going to slip out of your hand. However, most karambits are also going to have a longer, more curved blade for some knife fighting techniques called hooking. And with this one, from what I'm told, it was designed by a police officer in Hawaii. I don't know if it was designed as a public carry knife or a duty knife or what, but for whatever reason he chose to take the hooking part of the blade off and then make it a folding knife. And you can see where the curvature begins here, and probably in the original knife that he had been working from, it would have had the hook blade that reaches out to here. It was cut back substantially in order to make more or less a tanto point and a relatively small knife. The other thing is that it fits pretty much any of these length standards, regarding like the blade being narrower than the breadth of your hand, depending on I guess how you hold the sharpened part. But it generally is going to meet all of any of the size standards that it might be a little bit more restrictive, let's say in the big cities or something like that. The other thing is it's possible to grind the blade back a little bit and not lose its effectiveness. And I do actually grind the blades back a little bit when the knives get particularly dull. If I've been cutting roofing shingles or carpet with it and it gets particularly dull, it's a $25 to $35 knife. It's not the end of the world to cut that back a little more on a standard grinder type of equipment. The thing is that by changing this to the reinforced tanto type point, by cutting an original karambit blade design back, this becomes an excellent utility knife. And you can see that our blade profile when we're cutting like this is carpet knife, utility knife, except that you've got a relatively thick blade with a reinforced point, So in my work, in cutting construction material and boxes, I don't want a knife that's so big that it's going to reach entirely through a box and damage the stuff inside. So yeah, I do use this as a box cutter. I use it as a carpet cover cutter. There's a little bit of tar residue on there from some roofing stuff. And I'm going to show a little bit on how one of these blades can be incredibly beat up and then restored. Now here you can see it's in pretty good shape. We'll transfer to a little clip here where you can see how it looked before I just cleaned it up. And this is the Boker Plus Kerambit after a roofing job. You can kind of see the condition of the blade on that. But this thing outlasted several carpet knife blades. So this one is going to be sharpened. We'll show shortly how it looks like after the blade's been restored.
So here, after just a couple minutes of sharpening here, I've had to grind the tip down so the blade is actually shorter than it was before. Just working the flaps here and like this, and then working the curves on the edge. I've got a knife back in just a very short period of time. I would say that with this little short period of time sharpening, the rest of it's going to be cleaning the residual tar off the blade, and then fine sharpening with stones. But that's basically, because this blade is basically a karambit, which had the whole pointy thing taken off and then taken way back and made into what's basically a tanto tip as a work edge knife, basically like a sheepfoot knife. It becomes a better utility knife, and we'll explain more of that with the newer blade.
And so you can see here now, after the blade that was used on a roofing job was resharpened. If we look at the blades from the side, they look almost the same. If we look at it from the basically the top angle, you can see that one's actually shorter now. And that has to do with basically, well, we'll get that a little more even. You see how that had to do with regrinding tip. Plenty of utility left in a knife. That can be done a few times before it really becomes problematic. And again, I'm looking at a utility knife application, not so much a fighting knife application, although I'm sure nobody wants to volunteer to be cut with one. The other issue from a fighting knife standpoint is that while this is not a big enough blade to reach into vital organs in a hurry the way a true fighting knife would be, or even some models of large kitchen knife, the thing is that you have a tremendous amount of torque and control on that small blade because it has a full-size handle. If you're using, let's say, the blade section of a Leatherman tool, and you have a relatively good utility blade here, you're still talking about not a really big handle to control it. So, some of the really poor designs, like let's say the Victorinox knife, which is just plain out of date. So, this knife, you've got the pocket clip situation here, which I'm not a big fan of, but they make it so it's reversible. I think you can mount it on the other side, although it might require different screws to do that. Because the way they do the scale handles actually on one side, just opposite the pocket clip. That is one thing that allows you to at least if you're left-handed, you can physically engage that liner lock to make absolutely certain it's not going to disengage, let's say during a hard cut on something like construction materials. So you have a few different grip options here, and you can put your pinky in there to keep it from coming out. You can physically engage that liner lock to make sure it's not going to undo on you. I had an accident when I was a 10-year-old Cub Scout with a liner lock knife, where the liner lock gave way and cut my finger pretty badly when I was carving a pumpkin. But that explains, a little lesson from God not to engage in satanic Halloween rituals or something like that. I don't know. So the situation of being able to physically engage that liner lock is a good idea. The other good thing is if you totally remove the pocket clip, that's fine with this design of knife. What you would do is you can have the rear clip, which is a carabiner style of thing, and there's a lot of stuff that you can find that'll snap to. I really like to snap it onto little metal rings, and some of the pants we have, you'll have a little metal ring, little key ring dangler things, and of course on construction tool belts you'll have a metal ring for a hammer, but a lot of times there's another metal ring on the opposite side, and it's just a matter of being able to know where the knife is and know that thing's not going to undo on its own. With a pocket clip, what I find is that after I've been kind of crawling around and running and climbing and doing some rigorous physical activities, that can still rise up and pop out. And that's what I don't like about it. Although there's guys in a fighting knife situation, they want to be able to reach that knife very quickly where it's at the same spot every time. Matter of opinion on that. So overall, I consider this to be a really good general purpose everyday carry knife. The Boker Plus Kerambit, available on Amazon and eBay and through knife retailers anywhere from 25 to 40 bucks, depending on what kind of a deal you get. It's not so expensive. It's the end of the world if you lose one. I have lost mine on several occasions, so I purchased a spare so that I usually have one around. And I think it's good to consider everyday carry knives, which are not very expensive and not a designated fighting knife. Boker Plus Kerambit, really good choice.